Welcome to the Psychedelic Mindscape, a podcast that delves into two fascinating topics, psychedelics and leadership. I'm your host, Victoria Lauren, and today I'm speaking with Matt Zemon. Matt is an educator, author, and leader in psychedelic wellness, specializes in the impact of psychedelics on mental health, is the author of the bestselling Psychedelics for Everyone, and the preparation and integration journal Beyond the Trip. He holds a master's degree in psychology and neuroscience from King's College London. Matt combines academic insights with a passion for safe and sacred psychedelic use, focusing on broadening understanding and access to these transformative substances. Additionally, he consults with medical practitioners in psychedelic therapy, contributing his further expertise to the responsible integration of psychedelics in healthcare. Welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for being here.
It is awesome to be here. I've loved following your journey thus far. I'm excited that we get to have this conversation and record it. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, you, sir, have a background in so many different things, and I love how you approach psychedelics from all of these different angles. So I'm going to attempt to touch on as many as possible throughout our conversation. We'll see what we get to. But I know based on some of our previous conversations, that you had before your journey in 2019 had been in the world of startups and entrepreneurship. And I'd love to hear just about that transition from that world into this world of psychedelics.
I appreciate that. That's a great place to start. I was by all normal measurements, I was fine. I was successful. I built a bunch of businesses and been married for 25 years this year and have two beautiful children, and everything was fine. And some friends had invited me to do a guided magic mushroom journey. And I don't think so. I just don't do that. I didn't do drugs. And they said, no, you want to do this. This will be good for you. And I trusted these friends, and they were right. In that first journey, I reconnected with my mom, who had died when I was 22 and she was 49. I felt incredibly safe and loved, and then knew in the next instant that I did not feel safe and loved in my everyday life, and I wanted to find out why not. I understood the idea of a world where our ancestors could live, and I could connect to my mom and feel through me and into my children, and I could see how I'm carrying her forward and they're carrying me forward, and I could understand just differently. And I went in that first journey from not believing in God at all to, oh my God, I do believe in God, and I do believe in an afterlife, and I do believe in that we're humans having a spiritual beings having a human experience. And it was just incredible. And I wanted to know more, and that led me to go back to school from the geeky side so I could understand what science was saying. But it also led me to traveling around the country and trying different psychedelics from all sorts of different types of practitioners, from MDs and PhDs and taitas and shaman, and kind of just exploring consciousness. And then all that, fast forward a number of years, and here we are talking about the beautiful world of psychedelics.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that one of the things that I really appreciate about you and that resonates with me personally is that you bring those worlds of the science side as well as the sacred together. And that's just like I kind of view you as a bridge between those, right? It's like I think that you have an appreciation for both. And I'd just love to know from your perspective, does being in both of those worlds, does it kind of give you this ability to just speak to a person and kind of meet them where they are? Or do you kind of view yourself as trying to bridge those worlds? How do you think about that?
So I think to answer that, I think we have to go back in time. And back in the olden days, there was just healer. And the healer of the community was both a spiritual healer and a medical healer. And as we have evolved into our Western society as we know it, we have really separated those roles. And we have said pure science belongs to the doctors and pure spirituality belongs to the clergy. And what's interesting about psychedelics is they really do play in both worlds. And my rational side understands the argument of, well, if we give these psychedelics to just the clergy, they don't have the latest information about my body and my brain to keep me safe. Fair. But I also understand the counter argument that if we give these medicines just to the doctors, that they don't have the spiritual understanding to give me what amounts to a direct spiritual experience. So we need, and we're seeing it happen, we need a reconciliation between these two philosophies, between these two professions. And this new model that's happening, this collaboration, allows the consumer to meet the medicine where they are comfortable. Maybe they want to meet somebody with a lab coat and have a medical experience. Beautiful. They should be allowed to do that. Maybe they want to meet somebody that looks more like a clergy person and they want to have an experience in that direction. Beautiful. They should be allowed to do that. But for that to happen as effective for everybody, we need to bring all of this above ground. We need to have an open and honest conversation about what are the risks and how do we reduce them. We need to have open and honest conversations about what are the best ways to look for contraindications. How do we do informed consents? How do we monitor the ethics of these professions? And how do we give as many adults who want the opportunity to use these tools, the ability to use those tools? And I hope and I think that I'm, for whatever reason, I'm able to talk with both groups and try to help spiritual leaders develop, use medical best practices in their processes, and even have the processes for standardization and for risk reduction. And I'm able to help the medical professionals who would like to understand what happens in ceremony that might be additive to their protocols, how they could use some of those. And one simple example is most medical professionals are working in a one-on-one medium today. And that's super expensive, both for the consumer, and it's not very profitable for the medical professional. Most ceremonies are groups. Why? And is the group, because we have 10, 20, 30 people in the room, is it less effective for the participant? I would actually argue it's more effective for the participant. If you give me a choice of a one-on-one session or a group, I'm always 10 out of 10 times going to choose the group.
Me too.
And that's something, again, the medical professionals, they just don't know yet, but they will. And it's an amazing time to be alive where we can even be having these discussions.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, okay, there's so many places that I want to take this now. Let's see if I can keep track, because I want to come back to that whole concept of the healing potential of group ceremony. And I want to find out more about, the psychedelic churches that you're working with and, kind of how those ceremonies and rituals are set up. But before diving into that, I just returned from the Bay Area from attending Psychedelic Culture, and there was a really interesting panel discussion that was looking at shamanism versus the Western medical system. And they had a speaker, a woman named Adana from Brazil, and she, was raised in an indigenous community, and had been selected from an early age to kind of dive deep into the world of shamanism. And which, for me, that was powerful. This is the first time that I have met a woman that holds that title, because that is that's a newer thing. But I'm very excited that, just to hear that there's greater acceptance of including women from her, community and surrounding communities into that role of shaman. But she was also fortunate enough to have the opportunity to attend medical school. So, because that's what her community needed, was a doctor, someone that could, work at the hospital. And so she went, got her training, and in the beginning there, she was just really fascinated by how our system was kind of picking everything apart. It was like focused on the disease, focused on the body part. And, she ended up asking a question about, well, what are we doing for the spiritual health of the patient? And, and she's just getting laughed at, right? They're like, we're not diving into that. We're not talking about that here. So I loved how she gave examples of how in her work in the hospital, she'll be able to look at the reports. She gave a story about a woman who had given birth, but the newborn had high levels of bacteria, was going through sepsis. She was very aware that that this child was going to die. And so spoke with the other doctors about, okay, what kind of antibiotics, what sort of intervention are we going to do? And at the same time, was able to explain in terms that the woman and her husband understood. That was like the non-medical language, but she talked about it more in terms of spirits and energy and like what was happening to the child. And so her solution was combination of prayer and using shamanism as well as a course of antibiotics. And it was interesting because for the parents it was the prayer that saved the child, and then for the other doctors in the room it was the antibiotics that saved the child. And for her, she said, to me it's both, but it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that the child is healthy and is now leading a good life. So I just really appreciated her view of there's something that we can take from each of these worlds that can be offered to the other. And that's what I'm hearing you say as well.
I love that, Victoria. I think I'm going to take this in a different direction. And I love what you just said. So you're talking about an indigenous South American culture and a healer who became both a medical healer and a shamanistic healer, and is able to bridge those worlds in indigenous South American culture. Mm-hmm. I think that's beautiful. I want to remind your listeners about something or maybe tell your listeners about something that I'm not sure everybody understands. But when it comes to psychedelics and ceremonial use, so actually I'm going to switch our vocabulary. I'm going to now change the word to entheogen. So we're using now these tools for ceremonial use. I think most of us who grew up here in the United States learned about the Aztecs and the Mayans and the people in Central and South America and their use of these magic medicines. Most of us have heard about the Native American church and their use of peyote. I don't think most of us have heard about like the Siberian shaman using mushrooms up there. I don't think most of us understood that the witches burned all throughout Europe. Many of the time they were burned for their use of plant medicines. I don't think many of us understood that the Greeks for over 2,000 years were using a psychedelic substance in one of their rituals, and people like Plato and Aristotle and Marcus Aurelius all used Pythagorean, all used this entheogen in a ceremonial setting. I don't think most of us knew about the tribes in Africa using psychedelics, in China, in India. So I bring this up because our governments and our churches have done such a good job of suppressing the story of entheogens. I bring this up to remind all of us that we all have a psychedelic lineage. And we as modern tribesmen and women living in today's environment, we have the right to say, I want to practice the religion that my ancestors did underground, in caves, quietly, suppressed. I want to use those tools to reconnect with my sacred, to remember who I am, to remember why I'm here, to remember what happens not just after death, but before death and before birth. But it's not just the indigenous people who have this right. And they do have this right. And we all can claim this too. And it's an amazing gift to be born in a country that was founded on religious freedom, where our founders understood. I grew up in Philadelphia and with lots and lots of Quakers. And when you look at what happened to them in the 1600s, and I mean, William Penn was, I think he was in the Tower of London for like a year in solitary confinement for his belief. It's just amazing fortune to be born into a country founded in religious freedom. Less fortunate to have had this prohibition we've had over the last 50 years. But again, science and sacred is catching up. And and I think we all have a place here with this.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reminder that, it's not just something that occurs in one region of the world or with one particular lineage. It's something that has been found all over the world, and it's fascinating to me just how good of a job the war on drugs did of pushing pushing all of this further underground. And I feel like there's still a long road, working through a lot of the stigma. And it really strikes me just kind of in the two worlds that I'm walking in. One very deep in the world of psychedelics, and then the other with the executive coaching and working with businesses. um, there's just to me it almost feels like there's these two different wavelengths, and I'm doing my best to bridge those and to kind of introduce them to one another, just with the science and the sacred, feeling like there's beautiful synergies that are possible there as well. But I'd love to hear more just about with the psychedelic churches and kind of that whole movement, because what I'm thinking about is that church attendance has been plummeting in, like, we'll say, in the traditional organized religious venues. But then I see this blossoming of psychedelic churches that are working with, whether that's single sacrament or multi-sacrament, and just getting people excited about their spirituality again. So that's a very broad question, but I'll kind of let you take it wherever you'd like to go.
There's so much to unpack there, Victoria. There's a lot of baggage that comes with the word church, comes with the word God, that comes with the word sacred, comes with the word religion. For many of us, those haven't been safe spaces. For many of us, they've been weaponized, and there is a role and a place for them. And right now, we have seen, as you said, people leaving churches in droves, all across all religions. One of the things that is super unique about the use of psychedelics in spiritual practice is it gives the participant the chance to have a direct religious experience, to not just be told there is a God, not just be told to love your neighbor as yourself, not just be told that through God all things are possible, or that you can have heaven on earth, but to know it, to feel it, to know in your bones that you are loved and you are enough, and you are not alone, and you are worthy. And that's incredible. And for me, I grew up with a Catholic mother and a Jewish father. I was never taught that these true religious experiences were possible for me. They were just things I read about in these books about the olden days. But with entheogens in, again, ceremonial settings, with some consistency, they can do this. So then what happens? So you have a moment, I have a moment, I'll speak from the first person. I have a moment of awareness. I have a moment of remembering who I am and how powerful I am and how okay I am, and a different understanding of when I've operated in less of a sense of awareness and with different things. So then what happens? What happens for all those other days when you're not on medicine? And I think this is where people working with coaches like you or with therapists, where people can help unpack the um, the insights and turn them into actions, can unpack the emotions and turn them into words, can unpack the knowing of, okay, I understand there is a God. I understand there's God inside of me. Now, what do I want to do? And maybe that means returning to my Christian roots or my Jewish roots or my Hindu roots or my Islamic roots and having a different experience using all that infrastructure that's already in place, but coming at it from a very different perspective. I'm not forced to sit in the pew. I want to sit here. I'm not looking at these people like this is kind of, I don't know these people. I'm sitting here. This is my community and I want this community. I'm hungry for this community. So I actually think the use of entheogens and ceremony is good. Yes, for the psychedelic churches that are doing this and creating their communities, beautiful. And my belief is that many of these psychedelic communities are going to end up launching people back to the faith traditions that they come from, where then they can continue to learn and to study with a new lens these wisdoms that have been around for thousands of years.
That's interesting. So you really see the use of entheogens as possibly encouraging people to reconnect with their religious, we'll say, upbringing or origin, or whatever that is.
I think for some people they'll reconnect with pieces of their faith tradition that they want to. But it may not be the exact same church because that church itself may be so different in terms of the mentality and the mindset. But for instance, there's a really beautiful group called Legary that's run by a gentleman named Hunter Priest, who is an Episcopal priest for 25 years. And now he runs this Christians and Psychedelic group. There's another one I think called Shefa, that's for Jews. There's an Islamic group, there's a Hindu group, there's lots of groups that are, I would say they're really coming out of the mystic traditions. So when we look at all of these scholars, again, across, whether it's Kabbalah, Judaism, or Sufism with Islam, or the Christian mystics, yeah, that said, no. Look at the core teaching, feel the core teaching, embrace the core teaching, and then that becomes your daily practice. You're still, as the I think it was a Buddhist story says, you were chopping wood and carrying water before you were enlightened, and you're going to chop wood and carry water after. But you're going to do it with a different view of humanity, with a different view of all the different ways that life comes at us because of this understanding. And having a shared community and having a shared practice is a beautiful way to deepen and grow in the insights that come to you during these experiences.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm bringing this up because I hear so often like, oh, someone's gonna go to ayahuasca and then they're gonna sell all their stuff and move to Central America. Maybe, but more probably not. But they might have deeper seders than they were before. They might change the way they interact with their children and talk to their children about God. It might change the way they look at how their parents are dying and what conversations they want to have in that process. So I think those things are much more likely than the every now and again the person who sells all their stuff and moves to Brazil.
Yeah, exactly. To me, I mean, this is a very oversimplified summary, we'll say, but to me, it feels like it's that shift of going from walking through life with this feeling of I have to or I should do this, to all of a sudden accessing this mindset of, oh, I get to do this. It's like this gratitude and this excitement for life, and you choose, right, like what it is that you reconnect with, or like where you want to focus your energy. You're in charge of that. But I feel like there's a big difference when someone says, oh, I have to spend time with my family, or I have to go to church, or whatever, versus I get to spend time with my family. I get to go to church. And that to me kind of captures that shift that you can experience through these ceremonies.
Yeah, that is beautiful, and I just stay with that. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
again for me, what psychedelics have taught me is that I don't need anything on the outside to find my peace. I found it. I am very much at peace with this, with life. So when the need for external validation goes away, then it's like, okay, well, where do I want to spend my energy? For me, and it sounds selfish, but I believe that through that selfish act of, okay, I am I am trying to get closer to my sacred. I am trying to walk with this level of awareness. I'm trying to stay present in every conversation. Through that selfish act of being very aware of those items, I also am able to do things for other people and become an epicenter of helping to the best that I can be of help for people who ask. Um, and it's a different way to move through the world. And then again, bringing back to having a coach or someone that you can unpack this with. Someone who can say, okay, well, now that you really find your energy here and you're finding great satisfaction here and you want to help here, how do you tie all that together? And maybe that does mean shifting roles. Maybe it doesn't mean shifting roles. Maybe it means going to the role you have today with, again, a new understanding of what does that role really mean. Are you able to chop wood and carry water with this awareness and with this presence? And is that enough? And that's okay, because you don't have to do anything, because you're not trying to please your parents, and you're not trying to please your spouse, and you're not trying to please your friends and compete with this stuff, this very competitive world that we are indoctrinated into on day one. We're competing to get into the right kindergarten. Are you kidding me? To then possibly get into the right high school, to get into the right college, to get the right job. It just never ends.
It never ends.
It never ends. Oh. Until you say, I'm not playing on that. I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to be playing successful.
Yeah. I would love to get your perspective on this because, having been in both worlds of, we'll say like the startup and the go compete, you got to win sort of, place, to now this beautiful space of collaboration and co-creation. And so my question is, this is something that I've heard from clients. It's almost like this fear of, if I, let's say for first timers, if I have this experience with a psychedelic, and I know in my bones that I am loved, I am accepted, I am complete as I am, well, then what is that going to do to my motivation? Like, am I going to be able to show up for work and get things done if I'm no longer looking for that external validation? And my argument is always, as you said, you might not leave your job, but it changes the energy with which you show up. And so the focus is no longer, how can I, get the most accolades, promotions, stakeholders patting me on the back, revenue, like the focus is no longer on the attaining or the extraction of value. It's rather about the creation, the building of something, the being part of something larger. And it kind of leans into that, purpose-driven culture, that can be so beautiful in a corporate or business setting. So I just want to know, from your perspective, and for any of my clients that are listening, what you would say to those fears about, well, am I going to lose my competitive edge because all of a sudden I'm happy and I'm sitting in a place of compassion for myself?
It's a really tricky question to answer. I will tell you from my experience that every time I made a goal, the goalpost move. I will be happy when I have 100 employees. Okay, I'll be happy when I have 500 employees. I'll be happy when I have a building with my company's name on it. It didn't matter what the goal was. As soon as it was hit, I went on to the next goal. Um, I also know that I like building things. For me, it's this type of creativity. Um, I understand the challenges in running a business and how they have to produce certain levels of revenue to be able to have the gift to be able to be allowed to continue. So then with those understandings, are there ways to come to work every day and still go do an amazing job for yourself? I enjoy this challenge. I enjoy this building. I enjoy this creativity. I enjoy these conversations. I enjoy these people. I'm modeling. I'm being. Yeah, all that's completely doable. And sometimes the alignment's not right. And okay, I get it. And no bad anybody. It's just not for me. Okay. I want to go do this. And I want to bring all my gifts and my skills and my experience to this. Great. There is no response. I think it's Alan Watts who said you have no responsibility to be who you were 5 minutes ago. There's a freedom in this. And then, okay, if I'm starting again and living in the now, what do I want to do? And then there's also, I will also say there's a danger to this. There's something that's called psychedelic narcissism. There's something that is, there's a zone immediately following a big psychedelic experience where we actually, in the churches that I work with, we tell people no major decisions for weeks following a psychedelic experience. You work with your therapist, you work with your coach, you work with your teacher, and you take your time unpacking, so that you don't make life more challenging than it needs to be. And if after a few weeks you still feel good and you've come up with a plan, then great, go do that. But there's also there's a way to do both. To be careful and to find purpose-driven work that is aligned with who you are. Again, speaking from me, who I am, and what I want to do, and what gifts I want to share. Um, yeah, it's all possible. But I know plenty of people who are um, operating with a lot of intention and attention, and are doing really amazing, beautiful work at the exact perfect scale for them. And that's, I think, that I know we talk about that in the coaching world all the time. About what's the why? Really, what's the why? Um, I'll just tell a quick story. I don't know if you know the Mexican fisherman story, but so the story is there's a, uh, a Mexican fisherman who gets up every day and he goes and fishes for a little bit and he comes back and plays guitar and hangs out with his friends and sits on the beach in a Wharton MBA. Picking on Wharton, but Wharton MBA comes down and sees him and says, "Wait a minute, what did you do? You only worked for a few hours. You caught this many fish, and now you're doing this. Well, that's amazing. What you need to do is go get another boat, and then you can catch double the fish. And then after you do that, we'll go get more boats, and soon, um, and then the Mexican fisherman says, well, why? He said, well, then after you do that, we're going to have a whole fleet of boats and we're going to end up going public. We're going to take this corporation. You're going to be able to work out of here and you're going to have a fleet of fishermen boats all day long that are sending you fish and helping generate the revenue. But then what? Well, then we're going to take the public company. We're going to sell that company and you're going to make a fortune. And then what? Well, then for the rest of your life, you're going to be able to sit on the beach and play guitar and hang out with your friends. So getting to that why, what are you trying to do? And not being influenced by what we're told is success, what our parents think are success, what our teachers thought was success, what our government says was success, being able to know for ourselves, this is what makes me happy. If I can spend my energy and my time doing this, I've won. And I don't need the other stuff. I don't need to be on the cover of Fortune. I need this. I need this family. I need these children. I need these friends. I need this time. And again, coaches, therapists with the tool of the psychedelic can make clarity around these different insights.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. To me, what this reminds me of is, identifying success for yourself, and not in terms of accumulation of, the external wealth or material goods, but success as in living a joyful life, like living from a place of fulfillment and, peace and contentment, and kind of those things that our souls really yearn for, but that you might not put it on your list of goals for Monday of, this is what I'm going to achieve. But I try to, for myself, I can get really focused on, okay, these are my goals, these are my tasks, this is what I need to do. And I appreciate the part of me that is very organized and goal driven, because I do get to create more from that. And at the same time, I'm constantly asking myself, well, what if I could experience joy in this moment, just right now? Would I change anything about how I'm running my day? And a lot of the times, it's not that I would necessarily change the things that I'm doing, but it's that I would shift the energy with which I'm approaching it. And so it's no longer this like, oh, I have to rush through this thing to get this done so I can hit these other deadlines. It instead becomes, ooh, I get to play right now with what I'm doing, with this conversation. And that for me is, I mean, it's feeling very strong and very alive for me right now, because as I mentioned to you, I had the opportunity to sit in an ayahuasca ceremony. And, previous experiences with ayahuasca had been very heavy on the vision side of things. It was like lots of visions, lots of journeying and kind of traveling in the psychedelic space, we'll say. Or sometimes I'll call it the psychedelic playground. But this experience was, instead of going somewhere, it was dropping into my body. It was tuning in so that I was so completely present. And then noticing the joy of simply being in the present moment. Everything everything that I was experiencing, the physical sensations, the sounds, the smells, even the sounds of others purging near me. It sounded like music to me. It sounded so beautiful. And that was the experience that I needed.
That is beautiful. When and again, power of the medicines, but also power of each of us to choose to do this or not. For those who want to do this, it's available. For those who don't, it's okay. It's up to each of us. I think I want to add an added bonus. So, in addition to how do you want to live each, where do you want to put your energy, where do you want to put your talents, that you were talking about a moment ago, it's also doing so without the stress because you can't fail. And I think for me, that's again another reminder. If I'm When I want something from someone else, I can fail at that because now I'm having an attachment to an outcome that relates to another being. Um, but when the outcome is already, I'm good. So now I'm working on this particular thing, and I might not make this thing happen. The process is the really what matters. And again, I did not understand that until using these tools. And now I totally get it. It's not whether this podcast is downloaded by 1 million people or not. It's that Victoria and I got to spend some time today, and that was it. And maybe someone listens to it and says, "Oh wow, that was really cool. That changed my world," or "Fantastic." That's an added bonus. But if nothing else happens besides we had this time together today, I'm super grateful.
Me too. Me too. One of the things that I've been wondering, Matt, if you could pick a psychedelic that is your favorite to work with? And I would be curious to know for, the churches that you've consulted with that are working with multi-sacrament, because I know that you guys do like the multi-day retreats and, the experience kind of builds. But if you could name one that is your favorite to work with,
So
what would it be? Can you pick one?
Here's why this is such a challenging question. Is I actually think that these entheogens are used for different purposes for different people. So let me give an example of what that could look like. In January of this year, we held a retreat outside of Tulum in Mexico. And on day one, we used a heart opener. So for those listening who don't know what the heart openers are, there's typically two, there's more, but two that are mostly used. Some churches will use MDMA, and some will use sassafras, or otherwise known as MDA, which is like a longer, stronger, more visual MDMA. We use a heart opener to have a more subtle practicing starting point for a ceremonial weekend. It allows people to feel tremendous love for themselves and for others. It turns off shame, blame, and guilt, which allows them to start looking at their roles in different experiences and with a new lens, a new compassionate lens. It is a great way to practice ceremony and get used to being in a group, get used to facilitators, and get used to musicians. It's a lovely starting point. Now, for many people, they'll say, that's my favorite sacrament. I just want to work with that. In the science world, we're seeing beautiful results for people with treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder using that tool in combination with therapy. And after having the MAPS phase 3 clinical trials, 3 sessions with MDMA and some therapy before and after, like 70% no longer qualified as having a PTSD diagnosis. Incredible tool. So that's a heart opener. Day 2, we move into what was called the interconnectedness of all things. So for us, that's psilocybin. Other churches might use wachuma or a mescaline product. Other churches just go straight to ayahuasca. But for us, when you take a psilocybin, that's where it strips off all the layers, and you get to go to that core little light in your belly that's like, oh, I am love. I have infinite love to give. I can receive. I don't need to be stingy with my love. Oh, we are all connected. We might look like different waves, but we're part of the same ocean. Oh, I'm not separate and apart from nature. I am nature. And then what are all the stories that I've put on top of this beautiful spiritual being that might be making me live a harder life than I need to live? How do I unpack those stories? And how do I remind myself that these are just stories? So it's a beautiful medicine for those purposes. And then in that particular ceremonial experience, we added another medicine called Bufo, otherwise known as 5-MeO-DMT. And in that medicine, that's a non-duality medicine. So that's one where for 10 or 20 minutes, it's a super short-acting psychedelic. There is no you, there is no place, there is no time. There's just the energy of the universe. And it gives a potential look to what it might be like to be without a body, and be without a name, and be without a person. And for many people, they think of this as their conversation with their sacred. So I love when all 3 of those medicines are used in combination. And I totally appreciate it when churches say, sorry, we are just going to work with psilocybin. We are just going to work with ayahuasca. And that's going to be the one that's core to our religious belief. I get it. I understand it. But I think there's a use for all of these different medicines. And we didn't talk about ibogaine. We really didn't go into ayahuasca. We could probably talk for 5 hours, Victoria. But this is a starting point. And I guess I'd say to your listener, so now you've been listening to us for 45 minutes-ish, and you probably know what medicine you're attracted to. And I think I would recommend, you don't have to think that much harder about it. What I would recommend is go get a health screening. Go to spiritpharmacist.com and do a screening with Dr. Ben Malcolm, where he looks at the medications you're taking and the prescriptions and the supplements and your weight and your height and your age and says, okay, based on all this, you might have too many contraindications for this psychedelic, but you're fine with this psychedelic, or you're not fine. But go find out that and reduce the risk of contraindications, pursue whatever you're thinking about, and just try to reduce the risks as much as possible for yourself. And these medicines, luckily, are very low on the risk scale compared to many medicines that are legal. Alcohol is tremendously more dangerous. Tobacco is tremendously more dangerous. I think driving in a car or flying in a plane is more dangerous than mushrooms, MDMA, LSD. So thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Do you actually have, I'm wondering, like, if someone's been listening and they've heard us mention, this whole concept of psychedelic church, how would someone go about finding a group that is local for them? I don't know if there's like a database of all of these, or if it's better to just Google and, see what pops up.
It's really and this is probably a great thing for us to end on for today, because again, we could talk forever and ever and ever. This is tricky. So yes, you can look up Psychedelic Society near me and go find a group and talk with them and say, who is operating a church near me? There's somewhere between 200, 2,000. We don't know the number of churches. And they have a range of belief and a range of psychedelics and a range of practice. So finding a group of people who are in this space, talking with them, using your discernment about what feels right and what doesn't, that's important. But then the questions you want to ask are the exact same, whether you were looking at a medical experience, whether you were looking at a church experience, or whether you're looking at like a psychedelic tourism experience. And they're really around three broad categories: source, set, and setting. So sources is, where do you get your medicine from? Is it pure? And how do you know? So if it's typically the people who are doing this all the time, this is their profession, they've got pure medicine. It's the ones who are doing it every once in a while. Where'd you buy it from? Did you test it? Do you have the same source? So asking those questions. Set is, what is your mindset going in? So whoever you're working with, did they do a health intake? Did they talk to you about what medicine you're taking, how much you're going to take, what it might feel like? Did they do an informed consent so that you really had an opportunity to say yes or to say no? Did they help you set your intentions? All of that relates to your mindset. And again, same questions: medical, spiritual, and tourism. The third thing is setting. Wherever you're going, do they have control over the physical environment? Are they going to talk to you or not talk to you? Are they giving you music, not giving you music? Are you getting an eye mask, not an eye mask? Is it medical looking? Is it spiritual looking? Is it a living room? Are there going to be dogs, children, Amazon packages? Do you have control of all of the environment? What's the music going to be like? Ask those questions. How many people will be in the room? There is a very popular ayahuasca retreat center in Costa Rica, well advertised, super expensive. It's 100 people at a time. I'm not saying that's a bad number, but you should know that going in. There are others that are 40, there are others that are 20. Ask the questions. Are you allowed to touch me? If you are going to touch me, what does the touch look like? Those are all relate to setting. And then I guess the final thing is just the integration. Afterwards, are you going to help me unpack this? Is there any integration process? Or do I need to supplement that with my own coach or my own therapist and or my own teacher? Again, not that supplementing or not supplementing is bad. It's just you need to know what you're getting. And it is still very early stages for us as participants that we need to ask these questions, because we can't tell what we're getting just by looking at whatever the information is that's typically provided.
Beautiful. Yeah, that is great. Great advice, and just a good starting point for people, and things to consider, things to ask. So I appreciate that. And I know that we're at time for our conversation. And of course, in the show notes, I'll link to, we've got your book, Psychedelics for Everyone. We've got the journal tracker, Beyond the Trip. Any other places that people should go to find you, to connect with you?
Yeah, please come to mattzemon.com. There's a free guide to microdosing there. I'm active on LinkedIn and Instagram and really appreciate when people follow me. And I also answer questions there. My books are on Amazon and on Audible. And then my new book is a veteran's guide to psychedelics that I'm doing in collaboration with Heroic Hearts Project. And that should be out August 1st. And it'll have not only a guide for the veterans, but it actually has a companion document that's for coaches and therapists. And it's how do you work with the veterans using these handbooks. So I'm super excited about having that coming out here in just a few months.
That's really exciting. Okay. Well, I will keep an eye out for that as well. Thank you so much for your time and for this conversation, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, this was a treat. We need to do more of these, and I want to come out there.
Yes, please. We'd love to get you out here.
We're going to find a way to make that happen.
We will. We will. Thanks so
Victoria,
much.
thank you so much for today.
Thank you.